Boom. What's up, fam? Sorry, no video today. You're seeing Ghost President Johnson. Episode 141 of the Red Man Group, sponsored by 21university.com and 21 University apps. Check out 21university.com and join there. Start 30-day free trial. Get early access to 21 convention speeches and exclusive speeches as well that are not on the giant YouTube channel of 21 Studios. Today on episode 141 of the Red Man Group, How to Spot Liars and Manipulators, I'll be joined by DDJ, Bob Lewis, author of The Feminist Lie, Coach Noah Revoy, and Pastor Michael Foster, all returning guests to the show, and two of which are alumni speakers of the 21 Convention. Without further ado, here's DDJ, Noah Revoy, and Michael Foster. How you doing, boys?
Doing very well. Nice to be here again.
Good.
Likewise.
I appreciate you guys' patience with you're missing that video, but I'm here in spirit and in sound. Yeah, on today's episode, I wanted to focus on the title, exactly like it says, How to Spot Liars and Manipulators. We can go as beyond that as well, and I want to, how to deal with them, issues like that. This is something Michael Foster and I talked about a little bit, about potentially speaking at the 21 Convention someday about. It's something that is very near and dear to my heart. I think it's very important to men to be able to navigate life and how to spot it with women, how to spot it with men, how to spot it in your personal life, how to spot it in the workplace and beyond. So kind of opening thoughts, what do you guys think about this in general? Are men in the manosphere, are they attuned to these kind of things enough? Because they talk a lot of trash about, spotting BPD chicks and these things, and they all take the red pill and they're all alpha males. What are you guys' thoughts on what you've seen in the manosphere and men and their ability to spot manipulation and lies?
Do you mind if I take the lead on this one?
Go ahead, DJ.
All right. So I think that a lot of people, people get drawn to the manosphere for a variety of reasons, but I think that the thing that people need to realize is that everybody gets lied to. And, I've done videos, and Anthony, you and I have had extensive conversations about the red pill blind spot. And what I've seen is, at least from my experience in the manosphere, being here for, 4 years, 5 years, actively, and watching it for probably another 7 or 8. I think that the thing that I see is we listen to these people advise us on, narcissistic women, on dark triad women, on dishonest women, and how to spot those types of things. But I think that you don't see very many men in the manosphere saying, look, you need to be paying attention to the dishonest men in the manosphere as well. Because again, some of these people lie just as much as the dishonest females that they talk about. And I think that the problem that you have with that is that they are setting men up for failure, because a lot of times when it comes to dishonesty, some of these men are just as dishonest as the women that they talk about. So I think that those things are important, and you have to operate with a sense of ethics and absolute morality.
How dare you bring up ethics in the manosphere? That's feminine energy, DJ. It's feminine.
I got your feminine energy hanging.
Michael, do you want to go next?
Sure. I would say one of the defining characteristics of weak men is that they're orbiters, right? So they're desperate for direction and validation, almost certainly due to the poor relationships that they have with their father or with father figures. And so they end up orbiting around two types of people. First is women, and second is narcissistic, larger than life male personalities. And I think it's a function of them lacking direction and validation. In their mind, having a woman validates that they're a man, and having the approval of a father figure validates that they are a man. So they're on a desperate quest to get both. They think if they show devotion to these type of people, that this will result in some sort of reciprocal feeling. And we see this a lot with their attitude towards women, but it's not so, right? And that's why many of the kind of white knight types and the blue pill too, blue pill, red pill is like a mixed value as labels go. But nonetheless, a lot of these orbiters end as bitter men, because they tell women that they're brave, stunning, beautiful, whatever. They rush to their defense even when they're being morally horrible, right? And they defend them against detractors, and they show undying loyalty to their alpha guru type male, same way, very similar. So they connect themselves to some sort of personality. It's kind of like a tribal chieftain, and they defend him against nasty detractors. And so they hope they'll get the approval that they desire then if they do this. But that's not how it works, because relationship isn't reciprocal almost always, right? Women don't respect weak men, and neither do these alpha guru types. At best, they'll use them, especially the men. And that's why these orbiters turn into bitter men, and when they crash into the hard ground of reality of how these relationships work. Women respect men that, to use Noah's word, have agency, right? That are leaders, that are strong. And that's true of other men as well. Like a true father figure, like a real father, wants his son to grow up to be a man, to be a peer at some level, right? There's a sense where a father will always be ahead of his son just because of years, like at least Lord willing. But there's a time where he reaches manhood, and he now is what you are, a man, right? That's what a father wants. What a lot of guys do is what a lot of women will do, which is they kind of neg these orbiters, right? Just right, to keep them insecure and keep them in the orbit, because it makes them feel powerful. It makes the women feel beautiful and makes the men feel powerful. So a lot of these alpha gurus think they're leaders of men, but they're not leading them anywhere. They're just keeping men very, very weak and very insecure, so they'll stay dependent on them because really they're seeking validation as well, right? It's like
there's leaders of sheep. They're not really men. These are leaders of sheep, basically, at best.
Yeah, they're keeping these guys broken so they can profit from them, whether it be money, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not always, the grift's not always about money, right? There's fame, attention, strength, influence, especially as men age. So young men tend to care about sex. Middle-aged men tend to care about money. Older men tend to care deeply about influence and power. You know, that's speaking very broadly. Of course, all those things overlap to some degree. But older men, when they feel like they're not getting the respect that they're owed, they get kind of untethered, and they don't do well. So I think a lot of these alpha gurus, if you look at their stage in life and where they're at, I do think they're really after validation themselves. So I think that's kind of the baseline psychology that's going on there. There's a lot of other aspects in terms of the tactics they use to manipulate men, right?
No, I think it's a really good point, Noah. And I want to, or excuse me, not Noah. It's all these biblical names, Michael. Thinking like Noah's Ark. I want to revisit that later, though, the money issue, because everyone thinks it's like follow the money, and there's a reason that saying exists. I think, like, you know, it's a stereotype, but you're hitting the nail on the head here that it's about more than that, at least in this context, and that there are other resources that these sheep in wolves clothing that they're after, validation and this kind of feeding their God complex and whatever other issues are at play. But nobody wants to talk about that because it sounds too far-fetched and abstract, but it's real. Noah, do you have some opening thoughts on how to spot liars and manipulators in the manosphere and how men are currently dealing with that in our space?
You know, one of the things that Michael brought up that's really important is that they use the same tactics that manipulative women use. And one of the common things that manipulators do is they'll say, look at that guy over there, or that woman, that person, they're trying to manipulate you. Don't worry, I'm on your side. I got your back. And they'll give you like the hug of death. They'll pretend to pull you in on their team. And what it is as long as you're looking at that other person as the only manipulator, that's the enemy, they can stab you in the back all they want, take advantage of you as much as they want. And you're not looking at them. You're not expecting it to come from behind. You're expecting it to be from that person they're pointing at. And it's this kind of distraction that they have. And the way, you know, the thing is with manipulation is all based on lies. There's usually a lot of truth in it as well. So you have this mix, but it's not purely truth. It's a mix of truth and lies. Then you end up with manipulation. And the important thing to know is that they want something from you in a non-reciprocal relationship. You know, there are, you know, I have a lot of young men come to me looking for help, and they're not orbiters, and I won't let them orbit. They have to move. They have to progress. I want to see them regularly progressing, because if in a year or two They haven't really changed into better men. And basically, I tell them the moment they come in that in a year or two, you're going to be mentoring other men, because I can't mentor all the young, broken young men in the world. You're going to have to mentor men. I want to create like a wave so that it goes out. So it's not all about me. As long as you're not letting these young males grow into men, we know there's manipulation going on. So you see broken men that stay repeating the same phrases for 10 or 15 years. You know it. It's the same thing. And manipulators, they live on repetition. So they keep repeating the same basic thing over and over again, and they will brainwash you into believing it. Repetition is important for learning, but you'll see the same people haven't changed for 10, 15 years since they first joined the Manosphere. They're teaching the exact same thing, and the people they pull in are in the exact same place. And yeah, maybe some of what they say is true, but that's not helping progress. That's not helping mature men, and it's not really good for men. Men should never be static.
Yep, well put, Noah. And I've seen a lot of this in the Manosphere for so long, like 15 years, like you're saying. I've seen like miniature cycles of history in the Manosphere repeat themselves over and over again. And I see these young bucks come in, you know, they've been here for like 2-3 years and they think they know the space, and it's like, man, you have no idea. But also on a more individual level, what's actually happening with those revolving door guys, they come in, they say the same shit for a couple of years, they roll out, or they stick around indefinitely, like this lost sheep in Manosphere purgatory, and they're just repeating hypergamy, or other bullshit too, right? It's not just that; it can be inner game, or they can be all about tactics and blah blah blah, like whatever the repetitive concept is. It's like, it's so weird. RSD, you know, is, I think, super guilty of this. They've been doing it they have some of the worst guys I've ever seen in the Manosphere. This little cult.
Well, what's happened is that there's been kind of a ghettoification of the Manosphere, and like what you said, you know, when you repeat something to a certain level, it no longer becomes valuable advice; it becomes a platitude. And it's like what Muhammad Ali said. He said, "Look, if you're the same man at 50 that you were at 20, you've wasted 30 years of your life." And the big challenge that people need to have, and I think Noah hit the nail on the head, is that, you know, voices in the Manosphere, voices like us, voices like, you know, the other ethical people that are trying to do the right thing in the Manosphere, it's not about us. We're just a voice. We're not necessarily leaders per se. People may see us as leaders at some level, but the point is this: it's about empowering everybody else to be a leader. And so I'm starting to move away from this idea of alpha beta. And the reason I'm kind of moving away from it is because I think it's a misnomer. And I've talked about this, you know, over the last couple of years a little bit. And what I mean by that is like, if you look at social animals, right? The social animals, you have your alpha, and then you have a bunch of betas. But these betas they're not disempowered, right? They're not the cucks. They're not the bottom of the barrel. They are the number 2 in line. And what people don't understand is that the alpha in that social grouping retires and becomes a beta themselves, or gets older, or does whatever they need to do. These are natural stages in life through all social mammals. And you see this specifically in wolves, right? So I think that, just to use one example of many, but I think that the issue here is that, you know, you listen to people in a professional sphere, you know, whether it be, you know, managers or accountants or anybody who's an entrepreneur. And one of the things you realize is, look, in order to be a successful business, you have to make cost benefit analysis type decisions every day. You have to reconcile your business. You have to reconcile your books. You have to reconcile your money. And you have to make a determination of the decisions that you've already made. You need to say, look, we need to do a cost benefit analysis of this decision I made maybe a month ago to make sure it's still working with our business. The problem is that because we lack this healthy multi-generational mentorship, both in the Manosphere and elsewhere, is that we don't do this same sort of business reconciliation, cost benefit analysis with interpersonal and intimate relationships. Now, when guys in the Manosphere talk about this, both in the MGTOW community and in the dating coach PUA community, their solution is just walk away at the first sign of trouble, right? That's not a solution. Sometimes you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. And I think that this is a really serious issue in the Manosphere, because I'm going to take my toys and go home is not always the right decision. And, you know, I mean, obviously, being from the MGTOW community, I'm not going to get super excited about, people marrying most modern women in 2021. But if you're in a relationship or you're in a marriage and that marriage is working for you, that relationship is working for you, more power to you. But on the same token, part of the reason that that marriage and that relationship works is because you're doing a cost benefit analysis and you're taking corrective action. But part of that corrective action doesn't always have to include absolutes, right? And I think that the other side of this is again, it's what Michael Foster talked about. It's what Noah Revoy talked about. Is that this idea that you have these weak men who are being manipulated by these other slightly stronger weak men, and they're saying, yeah, look over there, don't look at me, don't look at the manipulation I'm doing, and this is what's going on. And again, a broken clock is right twice a day, right? But the problem that you have is that, again, it's like Facebook. If you look at Facebook Live now, you get these people that use Facebook Live as like a therapy and a validation, and then all the people watching their Facebook Live thing is like, yeah, we love your mental illness, go ahead and give us more. It's like a Jerry Springer show.
Yeah.
And you see some of this in the Manosphere now too, because the internet has matured, the community has matured, and you get this ghettoification of the Manosphere space. And so now you get these people that they don't have anything valid to say, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have a whole channel focused on denigrating somebody, or I'm going to have a whole channel focused on negative reinforcement. And anybody who disagrees with me, we can't really have a conversation. But on the same token, I'm going to denigrate you too. Now, that's not to say that there aren't concerned trolls out there, or that there are not sock puppets out there that are meant or that have infiltrated the Manosphere in an effort to divide. And we've seen a lot of evidence of that too. But
yeah,
I
I call
think
them the beta male police is what I call them, the BMP.
right, but I'm talking about people that masquerade as members of the Manosphere, but they work for a social justice NGO.
Oh, these
or
are the
they're being-
police captains of the BMP. These are the chiefs.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that again, it's those people that their goal is to disrupt. And you see this now in the MGTOW space. There's next to nobody making new MGTOW content anymore because were so successful in their disruption campaign. And these aren't just people who were anti-MGTOW per se. These are multi-billion dollar organizations hiring armies of sock puppets to denigrate something and or to misinform the populace. We've seen other situations where people will go in and they'll make a YouTube channel, and maybe they're popular for a year and they blow up out of nowhere. And you realize, when you think about it, you're like, wow, how do you get so many views, or how do you get so many subscribers? When you understand the Arab Spring from 2008 and 2010 and the lie that was perpetuated with it. The Arab Spring was a social media manipulation campaign used to overthrow governments. Nobody likes to talk about that. Nobody wants to have that conversation and give social media that sort of power. But then in the 2016 campaign, Hillary Clinton had her online troll army called Correct the Record. And all these things are really super important, because now you fast forward to 2021 and you have people walking in the Manosphere doing the same thing. Some of them are masquerading as Manosphere voices. Some are masquerading as dating coaches. And many of them, it's all a sock puppet astroturf movement. And I agree that the long-term impact of a lot of these things is we're weakening men. We are not strengthening men. And you see these men that are in the same place that they were when they started. And I agree. I mean, Michael Foster hit that right on the head when he said, look, these people are stagnant. That's why when we say women are human beings and men are human doings, because you have to be constantly moving forward and constantly evolving. And if you're not, you're eventually going to drown. And everybody, that's the thing. No one's immune from this. I don't care how masculine you are or anything else. If you destroy the supports of masculinity, every man falls.
Well, I was tweeting this the other day. I had a little wine and I was, thinking about something Michael Foster says. Michael Foster's fond of this saying that patriarchy is inevitable, which I love. My statements on hats is a little bit different. The future is patriarchy, but it's very similar to that. But at the same time, I think about it not only in terms of patriarchy, but masculinity, like you're saying, DDJ. And it's essentially that no one is above the laws of masculinity. No man. It's hard coded into your DNA. It's hard coded into, if you're Christian or religious, there are, supernatural being or whatever that has built this into how human beings need to work and must work. And if they don't, there's consequences. I look at it from a secular nature perspective, but to me, it's very, very similar. And that's for every man. If you have a Y chromosome and you're born with a penis and balls, there are certain conditions that have been established long before you were born, and your fathers and great grandfathers to the thousands of years ago. And you have to live by those. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences, and your life's going to get wrecked. Nature is going to crush you in some other capacity. Adapt or die comes to mind as well. DDJ, there's one thing I'll push back on you on a little bit, and I've gone back and forth on the alpha male, beta male thing, how to use these terms or not. Is it fun? Is it useful? Is it stupid? Lately, I've been using them a lot. I've gone back to loving them a lot, using them a lot, and I use them kind of like Jesse Lee Peterson, Reverend Peterson uses, and I use them to, number one, trigger people, particularly men, but also some feminists and shit like that. But number two, I'm not necessarily using them in some Evo Psych sense, beta male, alpha male, like a wolf thing. I'm using it in terms of a shorthand reference to a spectrum of masculinity. Less masculine being beta, more masculine being alpha. That's why I was pulling up the tweet I put out the other day. I got a little bit of traction here from Michael Foster and his family. I was thinking about nature shows, and they're like, observe the alpha male in his natural habitat, surrounded by his cubs. The surrounding beta males in the local ecosystem are terrified. So this is out of a place of love and respect for Michael and what he's done with his life. But I mean it too. And this to me is alpha, and it's in a way that's going to upset a lot of the PUAs and the red pillars who suck with women, but they think they're good because they have this fake secret knowledge, even though they've only banged like 5 girls, but they think they're slayers of the poon. It's totally delusional, and this upsets them. Because here's a guy with a lake count of 1 who has like 1 million kids and is very masculine, very alpha. Not to kiss your ass too much in public, Michael, but I think you're a great role model for the Manosphere. So yeah, I just put this out. And this, to me, this is alpha, and this would not be considered alpha by guys who are out like just banging, scores of women. So anyway, that's what I mean when I use alpha, beta, DDJ.
Well, I think we're on the same page as far as that's concerned. And the reality is that the reason that I'm kind of moving away from it is because a lot of people use that 80-20 rule, and then they say, oh, well, only 20% of the people can be like Michael Foster. And that's patently and provably bullshit throughout history, because the reality is that many men, the mainstream of men 50, 100, 200 years ago, had children, they had families, they had their faith, they had their communities, they had all the things that the men want today and think they can't have. And when you see this and you see successful families, I think that should give society hope, and that should basically demonstrate that, look, there's number one, obviously Michael Foster is an example with a large family. I believe Noah's got a reasonably sized family, and so those should give people hope, because the reality is the building blocks of communities are families, and they're families that are married. They're families with children where biological mom and biological dad are in the bounds of a Christian marriage, and the children are there. And Christianity is unique in that there is a level of humility and a level of forgiveness that is required to be Christian. And the problem with many people in the Manosphere is that they deal in absolutes. And again, I'm not saying that, every woman is worth marrying, or even every man is worth marrying for that matter. I'm just saying that when you see the success stories, you got to ask yourself, what are these people doing? How is it that they're making their decisions? And when you get to know these people, you ask them, does this stand the test of time? And in many cases, it does. So I think that when it comes to this idea of alpha beta, what a lot of these Manosphere voices say is, oh, well, that's only 20%. Michael Foster and Noah Revoy, they're the exception to the rule. And at some level they may be, but the reality is that they were the mainstream 80 years ago.
And this is a perception issue here too. If you talk to a high value man and you say, are there more high value men or high value women? Every high value man I talk to says, there's tons of women out there. Now, if you talk to a low value man and you say, is there any women out there? He'll say, no, there's no women out there. And you know what? They're both right. For the high value man, there's lots of women. For the low value man, there's few women. But the high and the low value man are not stuck in their position. If a low value man stops taking care of himself, stops having a high value lifestyle, if he stops living properly, he's going to sink down. Meanwhile, every 20-year-old guy is pretty much a loser. It's like you just are at 20. What are you going to do at 20? You probably have nothing going for you. But by the time you're 25, 30, you should have had a great life created. You should have been, doing something with your life. This is why it's so important that men don't get stuck, that they don't fall into one of these manipulators' traps where they're not growing up, because then they're still thinking like a 20-year-old when they're 30 and 35 and 40. They're still thinking that same mentality they had. And escaping that is, you see a completely different mentality. And a lot of it is just stop listening to the general advice and do what worked for your great-grandfather to a large extent. Now, picking women, it's a little different, but for a lot of things, be a man, be confident, be fit. We already know how to be a high-value man. Everybody knows that. One of my biggest concerns is there's a lot of talk about how to avoid horrible women and not a lot of talk about how to be a better man. And my focus is always with the people I coach, with the people that I talk to. What do you got to do to be a better man? Rather than worrying so much about avoiding risk, make yourself sufficiently robust that you can handle a bit of risk in your life.
I think what amazes me is you see these guys who are, in my view, in my judgment, like really terrible at spotting liars and manipulators, particularly with men, but also with women. They'll kind of LARP that they're good with, spotting at women, but they're not. There's losers with that too. But then they'll come after guys like Michael here, or Noah, for having like a family and a lot of kids and stuff. And they'll attack you, they'll denigrate you, beta trad cuck or whatever, all this crap. And it just kind of it stuns me because they'll have like 0 kids or like 1 kid, and then you guys have like a bunch of kids, and like that is not alpha. And it's like, man, these dudes are breeding. Like there's very little that's more alpha than having children that are biologically yours that you're sure of. And it's just so delusional to me anyway that it comes with the territory, I guess, these guys.
Well, and I think that also in kind of dovetailing off of what Noah said, these men don't know how to spot liars. They don't know how to spot manipulators, and they don't understand like when somebody there's always going to be someone, male or female, who's going to be able to successfully lie to you. They're going to be able to successfully manipulate you, and you're going to have to learn from that experience. And you need to be able to get out of that situation as quick as you can with as much money in your pocket as you can, because you don't want to be separated from your money, your time, or your energy, right? And so I think that's why, for me, I think it's important that we reconcile our relationships. And relationships are like gardens, right? You have to tend that garden every day. And if you don't, weeds grow in its place and they choke it out and kill it. And I also think that we can't allow ourselves, as masculine men, as men who think critically, we cannot allow ourselves to be compartmentalized by the women in our lives, or even the men for that matter. So like, you have these people that are out there, and we'll start with men. You have these men out there, these manosphere voices out there, and they project this particular persona, right? They put out this public image of who they are. And then you're compartmentalized in that viewpoint, and you don't really know who they are. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you find out some facts about this person at the lowest point in their life, that low point represents everything about that man, right? Especially, as we age, we all have high and low points in life, and these things are normal. But what I'm talking about is true compartmentalization. People who lie to you about who they are. I see so many people online who show their faces and use fake names. Or they have this one room in their house that is decked out as like this amazing room with all this stuff in it, but the rest of their house is just garbage because they're trying to do this success porn idea, and they're like, oh, look at me and I'm so great, right? So you can't allow yourself, when it comes to these male voices, you cannot allow yourself to be compartmentalized, and anybody who successfully compartmentalizes you is going to be in a better position to manipulate you, in a better position to be dishonest with you. Now, as far as women are concerned, when you're interacting with them in an interpersonal way, it's the same thing as with men in your life. You don't let them compartmentalize you, whether they're a colleague at work or a business partner, or people that you're friends with in the community, or even romantic interest. You can't let this, if this woman has this thing that she does and you're not a part of it ever, you need to ask yourself if you're being compartmentalized and take action accordingly. But I think that we also need to consider the idea of mirroring. So you get these people, like you always hear about the relationship in its beginning. They're like, yeah, I agree with you 100% and this and this and that. And sometimes that's not necessarily agreement. Sometimes it's a sign of deception, because they're trying to get you to lower your guard, to do exactly what Noah was saying. Look over there to the left. There's that dishonest person. That person's scary. Oh yeah, by the way, I agree with you. Because what they're doing is, over a period of time, is they are grooming you to be used by them. And then finally, I think that to respond to Noah's point, I don't necessarily focus a lot of my time on my channel on how men can improve, but I do reiterate some basic things, and they only take 10 seconds to say. If you're a man, exercise regularly. Have a job that has gainful employment. Have some hobbies that you're interested in, that allow you to invest your time, so you're not on the goddamn internet all day. And you need to have something that you believe in that's greater than yourself, whether it's Christianity or Buddha or whatever. My preference is Christianity, because it does things for people and for humanity that no other religion has done in the history of the world. And these, by and large, are good things. And so you have to have those things in your life, and you have to have that spirituality. And a lot of people, and again, I'm not kicking on atheists per se, but all these people want to start these movements that are secular. And history shows us secular movements don't survive. They may last for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but they don't survive. They eventually, they turn into a circular firing squad, and they start going after people. We see this now, even within the feminist communist movements. They're all turning on each other because they're all vying for power.
Well,
Whereas
on that same note, even nations don't survive. America is unique
Correct.
in how long it's survived as a republic, and even that's not that long, 200 and whatever years now.
Absolutely.
Compared to Christianity, which is over 2,000. So
Yeah, and you just made my final point for me, so I will shut the fuck up and get off the soapbox.
okay, yeah. I want to focus on Michael Foster in general for all of us, but let's have Michael go first. You know, where did you, before we get into more practical tips and tricks, so to speak, in spotting tricksters, where did you learn how to spot liars and manipulators, other than just generally by living life and surviving? Did you, I know, Michael, you were a card counter, for example. Is that what taught you how to spot these people? Or did that help?
Well, I mean, I grew up. I think some people have a natural gift of discernment, right? They're sensitive to tonality and body language, and they pick up on habits. And, you know, it's kind of like a friend of yours is talking, and he suddenly says this phrase or word, and you never, ever heard him say it before. Right. And you're like, oh, that he's been reading a book or watching a podcast, and that's where that came from. You know what I mean? Like, I think some people have a natural temperament to pick up those patterns in relationships. I think that's probably true of me. In the ministry, though, a big part of what we do is try to get to the heart of matters, right? And like listen very carefully what's going on to people, you know, with what they're communicating and what's actually true, you know. Because the thing about liars is they're dishonest, right? They're not straight up. But there's something liars can't. They always have to work from the truth, so they'll corrupt it. So you'll learn to listen to things like adverbs, right? You know, and this is the example I always give people. I ask my son, is your room clean? Well, it's mostly clean, which means it's not clean, right? So adverbs are always words that weaken a statement. They're qualifiers. And so after a while, you start hearing people creating these hedging statements, these back doors to get out of accountability and not own up for things. You know, and so you learn that in the ministry. I also grew up in a broken home full of a lot of alcohol abuse, a lot of gambling, just bad relationships and everything. You get kind of sensitive to that. So for me, I think it was a mixture of a natural temperament, the way I grew up, and in the ministry, you're taught, if you are trained well, which to God's glory I was, thankfully. You listen very careful to what people are saying and whether or not it's true. You know, it's congruent with their actions. It's congruent with their whole life. And that's why manipulators are online, because you don't know their life, right? You don't know anything about them. All right, they're in good shape. Awesome, great. Do they know how to resolve a conflict with their wife, or do they just have to are they a big baby that has a gym bag by the door and they grab their gym bag every time and leave when they get in an argument with a woman because they're so weak they can't resolve that argument? They have to freak her out that they're going to leave, up their dread game. I'm not saying that there isn't a time to just get out of the situation and let her know that she can't rule you. But if that's your go-to for resolving conflict, you're pathetic, right? Men learn how to resolve conflict with women. But you don't know this when all you see is what people say they do online, right? You don't know their life. And that's why actually having real world fraternity is so important. That online is a supplement, right? Supplements are good, but it's not a meal. You can't, masculinity is caught more than it's taught, right? That's why fathers are so important. And with a lot of these guys online, you don't know the reality of their life, and people just assume. I was talking about this the other day. Someone asked me if I ever lose my temper with my kids, and I was like, man, that is a dumb question. Of course I do. What in the world would make you think that I'm this perfect father? Well, I see you talking about how to be a father online. Well, yeah. So what? Those are tips. These are things I'm working through. But for some reason, you just assume that I've got this all figured out. I've come to learn that a lot of men kind of think that way about social media influencers. They just assume they've got it all figured out. And to me, that's strange. I think the opposite, right? Because I know my own life.
It's unrealistic and it's hyper idealistic. They absolutely they see you give a tip, about something, and they just idolize you to the extreme. It's some sort of, I think when you open up the show, Michael, you were talking about the roots and trauma and the psychological roots of where this manipulation comes from. And, they're looking up to these gurus and stuff, and it's all fake. But they're looking, it's they're hungry. One of our old speakers, Greg Swan, used to call it father hunger. They're hungry for a father or a father figure, and they didn't have it. And it's a wound that's still bleeding, essentially, psychologically or spiritually. And
absolutely.
This is for 10, 20, 30 years at a time, not just a couple months or a couple years. It's a long-term pattern of behavior. And it's really sad. And it comes with very negative, disturbing consequences. You mentioned, for example, you're talking a lot about this shield kind of that the internet creates around these public personas that these fraudsters create and stuff. And the Manosphere and other industries too. It's not just the Manosphere, it's every industry. And I really tried to focus on that in my documentary about the truth about Donovan Sharp, highlighting the public figure Andrew Gillum, the former mayor of Tallahassee, contrasting that, his run for governor, then getting busted for smoking crystal meth and banging a gay hooker behind his wife's back and his kid's back. And it's people want to blame politicians too easily, and it's not just them; it's all the public figures almost. There's a percentage who are genuine and authentic and savage, and then loosely speaking, the other 80% or 70% or whatever are a bunch of losers who are just complete fakes, and it's all manufactured internet presence at this point. And it used to be much more, even before the internet, it was through media, TV, magazines and stuff. It's all this manufactured fake matrix type reality, to use a matrix analogy. And it's really fucked up. And I think what guys are surprised with, people were I need to address this in part 2 of my documentary, but they're why didn't you come out sooner about Donovan and this and that? And there are timeline reasons why, because I didn't know everything. People assume I knew everything the whole time. That's not even remotely true. The opposite is true. It was a slow trickle. But essentially,
there is a system though that I think would be helpful just to point out real quick. Sure. Is that there is, so I used to live in Bloomington, Indiana. So I have a lot of friends who got their PhD and went on to become professors. So I just have a lot of friends in the academia, and they would talk about the conspiracy of lazy students and lazy professors. That lazy professors don't want to give out homework because they don't want to grade it, right? And there's a conspiracy in the Manosphere, in any social media area, between the viewers, followers, fans, whatever you want to call them, and the content creators. The fans don't want reality. Many of them don't. They want you to lie to them, right? And then some of those content creators who don't have a commitment to truth and are trying to build a followership, a fan base, whatever, subscribers, get their money up, they will actually give the people what they want, right? They'll say, oh, that played really well. and they start to cater to the hunger, to the desire. And so I don't want to make these guys out. They are being duped, right? But many of them want to be duped, right?
Yep.
They
Bingo.
just want to, you know.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think in the Manosphere, even where the red pill is valued in the MGTOW community and the red pill community, and to a lesser extent in the men's rights and pickup artists, they don't actually want the red pill. They just want the feeling of taking the red pill. They want the feeling of having allegedly secret knowledge about women and masculinity in the world. And for the most part, it's not entirely bullshit, but for the most part, it's just bullshit. It's hurt, wounded beta males in sheep and wolf's clothing pretending to be quote unquote alpha males to teach these beta males about women and life and masculinity. And it's this incredible inception level circle jerk of fakery, and it's all nonsense. I mean, I know. So this is what I was getting at earlier too, Michael, is that the reason my documentary about Donovan was so shocking and what a lot of guys are not still getting is that number one, to expose someone at that level for a 3-hour expose like that, you have to know them in real life. You have to be able to see beyond the veil of the internet. Whose audio is that? Oh shit! Is that Noah? Oh yeah, somebody with kids. That's for sure. I didn't mean DDJ. Well, he ain't. Whatever.
My kids are old.
Yeah. Anyway, the only way to do that, to expose someone at that level, is to actually know them in real life for a long period of time. Number one. So it was a unique opportunity to do that, and I did it with Rollo in the past as well to an extent. What a lot of guys aren't getting that we're talking about here is that this is like a huge chunk of who these people follow on the internet, particularly in the manosphere, but even beyond that. And so these guys are shocked. They're like, I can't believe this is true. Oh my God. And the information is shocking, but it's not so shocking as to overwhelm the, if this is the right word, banality of it, the absolute boorish nature of how fucking common this is. Like, if you follow someone who's big on YouTube and you think there's some badass with money or women or life or masculinity or whatever, they're probably a complete loser. Like, the reality is the exact opposite of what they present, because they're presenting what you want to hear, which is to pander to you with whatever BS is going to make you get sent super chats, which is probably going to feed into your trauma and your history and your father hunger and your woman hunger and your mommy issues and blah, 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 blah.
That's like those, before the internet, you had these confidence men that would go out there and they would be like, look, I'm going to turn you into a real estate investor, or I'm going to make you financially independent, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. Right. And then when you look at these men's lives, again, it was the image of success porn. Like Dan Blizzerin, I think, is one of the prime examples. This guy was like success porn master for years and years and years. And then once somebody got close to him and they weren't compartmentalized by him, they realized that everything about his life was a fraud. And I also think too that there's a huge amount of people, a huge amount of men and boys who don't turn to the manosphere because they want to be lied to. They turn to the manosphere because no one else is telling them the truth in their real life. Their father has been alienated from them, even if he's still in the home. They've got no, extended family to support them. So they turn to the internet in looking for their answers because they can't find the answers in their real life. And the problem is that you look, when you ask guys, or when you ask people what they want to be today, one of the top professions that people say they want to be is they want to be a YouTuber. Right. So they're online specifically to make money. They're not there because they care. They're not there because they're trying to help. They're not there because this is their ministry or this is their calling. They are there specifically to make money. And it's just like what Michael Foster said. They know, oh, this lie plays really well. Let's go ahead and repeat it. But I think that the other piece of it is that they're also using their content to groom these followers to believe in this sort of thing. So here, let me give an example. I've scripted this video. I haven't published it yet, but let me make a really valid point. So in the manosphere, you're going to hear these people occasionally talk about taking women's rights away. They're like, oh, we need to repeal the 19th Amendment. We need to repeal a woman's right to vote. That'll fix everything. Okay. Now, this was originated within the MGTOW community by somebody who does exactly this. They use repetition to groom their audiences to deal with this. And what ends up happening is that they, over years, people believe this lie. And so this whole take women's rights away has morphed into a monster of its own. And it's become this idea that everybody in the manosphere should do it. Or this intelligent person said it, so therefore we should do this, right? It's like some brainy Smurf bullshit. So the issue here, though, is that in 1989, the state of Colorado repealed women's rights to vote in their constitution. Okay, it's been repealed for 32 years. Nobody talks about it. Well, guess what? Did it change anything? Or can you go to Colorado and is Colorado a bastion of slave women and masculinity where you could just bend them over like dogs in the dog park? No. Colorado is a liberal shithole. It's a stronghold. Yeah, there's pockets of America still in the state of Colorado, but since 2005, it has been run by leftists. If you look at the history, the legislature, the governor, the executive branch, it's all left-wing people for the last 15 years. And you know what? Feminists never bitched about it when they repealed it. And nobody's tried to say, oh, we need to have this back in the Constitution of the state of Colorado. No, they don't care. The point is that you get these people who say something, it sounds good, they repeat it, and they say it to an audience that's been groomed, sometimes over a period of years, and then they walk off with these dysfunctional ideas that are entirely disconnected from reality. And then they're like, this is great. So this is a perfect example, but it's one of many. And I think that anybody who hasn't been a part of the Manosphere, when they go to the Manosphere and they have some life experience, or they have some real world leadership experience, or they have real world success in their community, right? In other words, they're involved in their community, they work hard, they invest, then they come onto the internet, they're like, wow, this place is super dysfunctional. And it's true. But that's part of the reason is because, again, you have these people who've entered the internet in the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of these people, they're not there because they have any altruistic motives. They're there because their motive is to pad their pocketbook, to get the fame and to get the respect that they feel they deserve as they age, just like Michael Foster and Noah Revoy both touched on. And then they don't care what they say, whether it's true or not, or whether it harms men or hurts men. They're just going to go ahead and spit it out because, look, I looked at my YouTube studio analytics and I got a 99% like rating. So obviously, this lie is a good one to repeat. So it's again, I apologize for soapboxing, but this is something that kind of hits home for me.
Yeah. Let's get Noah next. He's got to go. Yeah, I
got to go. I'm actually going to be teaching a course on agency today, and that is really one of the big keys to making you immune to manipulation. When you have control over your thoughts and your emotions and your instincts, then it's hard for other people to use those against you to manipulate you. One of the best ways that you can identify a manipulator, if someone's trying to manipulate you, is that they're not giving you personal responsibility. They're not putting agency on your shoulders and saying, this is your problem to solve. I can help you, but this is your problem. What you see instead is they sell you excuses. A lot of men, they do come to the Manosphere absolutely looking for solutions to their problems. And when they get here, because they're human beings and humans love excuses, and because they're still often young and undeveloped, so along comes a snake oil salesman selling them excuses. You can't get women because you're too short. You can't get women because you're not attractive. You can't get women because you're not a six-figure earner, and hypergamy and blah, 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 blah. Instead of saying, look, you can get what you want, but you're going to have to work for it. And this is how you can earn it. This is a huge difference between the manipulator and the person who's persuading, who's actually trying to help you, who wants the best for you. Watch out for anyone that's selling you an excuse. Definitely a manipulator. Thank you very much for having me on today, Anthony. I'm looking forward to next time we go on. And, I'm actually writing a book on anti-manipulation that'll be out about this time next year. So in that case, I'll be able to recommend the book when it comes out.
Outstanding. I appreciate you hopping on today, Noah, and everything that you're doing. Sorry we couldn't start sooner. I'm going to work out this.
No problem. Tech issues happen. Have a great day.
You too. Everyone watching too, you can check out the link in the description for Noah's website, smv4k.com. He's on Twitter as well. Check out his site. There'll be a link to his Twitter. Yep. So, man, there's a lot to go into here between DDJ, Soapbox, and Noah. But I do want to move on. I'll just move on to the next question anyway, though. I think it'd be pretty good. So for both of you, and all three of us can dig into it, are there any differences that you've experienced in life between spotting female manipulators and male manipulators? Not only, from the inside out, but like anything that you yourself as a man need to be aware of. For example, if you're a heterosexual man, you don't want to put your penis in a male manipulator, but a female manipulator, you want to put your dick inside of. And in my view, that would make you emotionally or physically, biologically compromised. So just kind of any comments on that?
What I would say is that women naturally use indirect language, and it's not always them being manipulative, right? It's just so if Owen Benjamin does a really good stand-up routine on this from a long time ago, but where he talked about how if the woman wants a blanket, she would point out that the room's cold, right, and expect you to grab a blanket, right? She's not trying to manipulate you per se. She wants a blanket, and women tend to be a little more indirect in their request, their conversation. I think it's normal because I think women try to smooth everything over. They try to keep relationships as friction-free as they can. The majority of the time, that's not always true. Obviously, there's a love of drama. That's the flip side. But we're talking about normal, healthy women here. Would try to smooth things out. Plus, women don't deal with things through direct conflict because they're weaker, right? They're not as physically strong, whereas a man can engage himself in physical contact or physical conflict and resolution that way. So I don't think you want to treat men and women as if they're identical, right? In the way they manipulate. Now, they are identical in the sense that they are going to obscure the truth and whatever. But with men, when men are being indirect in conversation, they are either dreadfully insecure or manipulating you. One of the two, right? Because men respect direct communication. Our communication is built around building things, right? So you have to learn to say, hey, let's get this done. And then you do this. And right, there's a linear nature to most male communication, where with female communication, it's a little more circular and kind of avoids the main point. Right. So a lot of times when I'm listening to my wife's stories, I'm like, where is this going? What is this about? Is there a punchline? Well, the story is the punchline. The sharing of the experience is a punchline. With a guy, what we're trying to do is achieve a mission, complete an action, whatever. So that requires much more direct communication. Whereas with women, it doesn't. So I think with men, if it's indirect, then it's clearly it's more likely a manipulator. So,
and by indirect, it could also be passive aggressive. There could be a lot of variations of this, right?
That's it. That's exactly right. So, so I would just try to be. If I have a problem with somebody, I'm very straight up. I don't wait for it to take. I don't just think about it. I'll just ask, is there an issue? Do we have a problem? Here's why. Yep. And a woman's not going to do that. She's going to kind of bounce around the topic. Right.
Yeah. It just reminds me of in the Manosphere, there's a lot of people who trash talk, not just me, but others, but they do so and they don't mention the name. They make it like very clear they're talking about you through symbols and things. Some people, for example, call me like red hat guy, and it's very obvious they're talking about me in a context, but they're too chicken shit. They're manipulators and they're indirect. They won't address me directly or an issue like that. And in every case, so if someone does this, they're just a huge pussy, like every time. And to me, it signals that they're a manipulator, or certainly it's a symptom of that should be taken very seriously. Like red flag, basically. The passive aggressive behavior, red flag, boom.
Yeah, I think there's a time to be sly in your language. You see Jesus do it quite a bit with the Pharisees, but that's when he's being led into a trap. And they'll ask him a question and say, well, let me ask you this question first, right? There's a time for it. But I think in general, indirect communication is effeminate and men shouldn't use it. With women, there's way more topics on that way more streams you guys have done than that. I know when my wife was trying to manipulate me early on, and we both tried to manipulate each other, and we had to get to a place where there's something bigger than the relationship that we're working towards. For us, it's fearing God, serving God, obeying Scripture. There's a law greater than us, and it's not just a competition between who's done more or wrong or done more right, and whoever's got the most right gets to win the argument, because that's where those arguments go a lot of times in relationships.
Yeah, I would agree too that there's a time and place for everything. So just because we view it, men speaking this way as effeminate, doesn't mean it's impossible for a masculine man to speak that way indirectly. For example, as a joke or to insult somebody intentionally, you know, dance around the issue, which I'm not opposed to that. But that's a small minority of how I would ever conduct myself. I'm much more, as you guys have seen, like both of you are as well to a degree, blunt, direct. I stand on my own 2 feet to fight for an issue or to defend my honor, to attack an issue, and so on. DDJ, do you have some comments on the differences between female and male manipulators? What you've experienced, what you think about the issue?
Well, let's start with the females first, because I think that females who are married or in longer term relationships, they manipulate differently than women in the dating scene or single women. Women in the dating scene and single women are going to be more likely to use emotional blackmail, such as shaming, trying to wind you up with shit tests, threats, guilt, certain types of intimidation. But you also have to understand too that both groups of women, both married and single, I think that one of the main issues here is that their manipulation doesn't just consist of themselves. So a lot of times when that bad faith manipulation is happening, you're going to see them do whispered campaigns. So they're going to contact people behind the scenes, and then what they'll do is, they'll vent to these people and be like, oh, this person is this and this person is that, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to pressure that person to do what they want. They want to control that man, or they want to control that partner. So they create this environment where they've manipulated this environment into being. And then, like, say, you get together with your friends, or you have a couples night or something like that, and then you show up, and then they start pushing your buttons and they start shit testing you in this super passive aggressive way, in an effort to get that response they're looking for. And then when you respond in a reasonable way and you challenge them in front of the friends, then she looks at the friends and goes, see what I'm saying, right? And so in an effort to deal with that sort of thing, you have to be a man who has some sense of internal validation, in addition to understanding that, as a social animal, some external validation is needed. But when you walk into these scenarios with this type of manipulation, understand that you should not allow yourself to participate in manipulative environments created by these manipulative women. Now, I will say this: if you're fucking up, if you're doing something that's completely wrong, and some of your friends step in and try to have an intervention because they care about you, that's a horse of a different color. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is that when it comes to a lot of these women, especially single women, you see the compartmentalization happen, and then you see these people and they try to mirror what you say, and then they do these things, what I like to refer to as the foot in the door tactic, where they do this slow escalation burn, where they mirror you and they tell you how wonderful you are. Then they get you to do something small for them. Then they manipulate you a little bit more, and they do something small. And then all of a sudden that escalates. And women are far better at long-term manipulation than men are. And that's just because of the nature of who and what women are, right? They don't have the physical strength that men do. So they're not necessarily designed to be as forthright as men are. And like what Michael so accurately says, women communicate primarily in an indirect fashion. And they're not always doing that because of manipulation, but that's just the nature of females at some level. But when you're talking about bad faith manipulation, they kind of turn that up a little bit. Now, as far as male manipulation is concerned, a lot of times what'll happen is that these men who want to manipulate you, they will try to get your guard down. And this is why I talk about like the red pill blind spot. They try to get your guard down, and they try to, number one, they want you to perceive them as infallible. So they're hoping that they're going to do things to get you to put them on a pedestal. And part of that, both with male and female manipulation, part of the way that they manipulate is they compartmentalize you. So in other words, they keep big portions of their life private, right? And so that ends up being a huge issue. And you see these people tell these half truths where they tell you the truth about something, but there's something like there's like a glaring dishonesty behind it. And they're trying to manipulate you there. So they want to put them on a pedestal, while at the same time they're trying to puff you up in order to lower your guard. Oh, you're so great, or man, I didn't realize that was what was going on, or this and this and that, right? And then when you put your guard down, then they can use that foot in the door technique. and they can do the slow burn escalation of their manipulation. And then if you say something about it, like you go along with it because you don't understand it, you say something about it, then they resort to the same tactic of that same emotional blackmail, the shaming, the, oh, well, I thought this, and they get all passive aggressive on you. So those are two ways, or I should say those, in my view, kind of provide kind of a general primer of a lot of the ways that men and women manipulate. But I will also tell you this, because women communicate indirectly in general, for the most part, they are better manipulators as far as long-term manipulators in your particular environment. And by the time you discover that a female has manipulated you, especially if it's a female that you've trusted, you're the last one to know. She's already been telling other people about it. She's already been, and sometimes she might even just black and white admit it to someone else. And then by the time you figure that out and you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then you talk to your friends about it, like, oh yeah, she told me about this 6 months ago. And your quote unquote friend never said a fucking word to you.
Yep. I've actually, I've experienced some of that in my own life, as some of the fans would know. I've also seen that to the T, what you just described. A girl cheating on a guy, her friends, that know the guy find out 6 months in advance before he finds out. Then he finds out, and he finds out that these third parties knew, and he's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I've seen a guy confront girls like this. Like, I've known you for 10 years, longer than this girl. How the fuck you didn't tell me? And it's confusing to guys because that guy was applying like a masculine framework to that friendship, and he didn't understand that women are going to hold secrets like that, even above and beyond a really extensive duration of a relationship that he had with another woman that was, not intimate or anything like that. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but I've
Well,
seen
and that
before.
scenario demonstrates both male and female manipulation in the same instance, right?
Yeah. I want to so let's shift gears a little bit. I want to get into more nitty gritty tips and tricks and tactics for spotting these people, like the title of the episode describes. I'll start off with two of my own. So number one is to basically trust your gut. This is something I learned from Joe Navarro, and if I had a video right now, I would show the book. His book's Dangerous Personalities and whatnot. But trust your gut, and that sounds very simple because it is simple, but it's something that not enough men do. They don't do it with women. They don't do it with men. They get a gut feeling. They get, hair on the back of their neck. They feel uneasy somehow, even if it's just very faint, and they don't trust it. They're not skeptical enough of people that they don't know, and they're too skeptical of their own inner instinct and gut feeling and these things. That's I think part of your brain, your hindbrain or whatever, telling you that there's some sort of danger or something going on that you're not fully aware of, but you should be wary of. And I think our brains are actually very attuned to this. There's a lot of research on this too, but you should trust your gut and, trust it right off the bat. What is the old saying? Your first instinct is the right one. Your first response is the right one. That's not always going to be true literally. So guys that are or hyperanalyze that, be too literal, but trust your gut. It'll get you a long way with spotting stuff early and keeping it at bay, keeping it out of your life. The second tip I'll give before one of you guys gets to go here is that people communicate an enormous amount of information in almost everything that they do. This is actually the root of where in the Manosphere we say like acting on verba, actions over words, watch what they do, not what they say, or ignore what they say. These guys in the Manosphere will do that for women because they're told to do that for women. The red pill guru will tell them to watch what women do and ignore what they say, but they won't apply this same common sense, good logic and idea to men, including the purveyor of that idea, that guy giving them the advice, which is the first and exact place they should put that red pill lens is on the individual. I'm happy for guys to do this now listening. And I'm telling you, with women and with men, watch what they do. And for the most part, ignore what they say or deprioritize the words. Talk is cheap, action is expensive. It's more difficult to lie with action and more risky than with words, which can be, there's probably some Christian sayings for this and biblical phrases, but like, the tongue being so slippery and this and that. I'm sure religions have dealt with this in many ways, in multiple religions. But yeah, the tongue, the silver tongue and all this stuff, right? The Manosphere is filled with this crap. These guys, they keep asking me, who are the frauds? Who are this and who are that? And where are the liars? How do you spot them? It's like, man, they're everywhere, and it's very common. And a lot of guys, they're not skeptical enough, what they see out there. But again, people communicate an enormous amount of information in everything that they do, right down to, for example, it's not, if you're engaging with a girl, for example, it's not just what she says or the action she takes. It's the speed at which she takes them in response to you. That is itself conveying information, conveying how she's feeling about you specifically, not just in general. what kind of relationship she wants to have with you and how that's going to operate. Is she going to be responsive to you at your beck and call, or put you off and play games, or something in between? Men the same way, if they're teasing you with all this marketing bullshit and 5 copies of my ebook left and this and that, this is just flagrant bullshit that doesn't make any sense. But they're willing to do that, and that action communicates a lot about their ethics and the principles that they're going to follow if you dig deep into it and peel off the layers of BS. So those are my 2 tips. Trust your gut and just pay attention to what people do and what they say. Everything that they do is conveying information. Even the words that you should deprioritize, that's still a thing you should look at in its own sense, its own context.
Yeah, I'll pivot off that a little bit. So, this is just a variation of what you were saying on your first one. So I put this in the live chat, but a tactic of a manipulator is to mostly focus on the subjective. They'll try to make everything about what they claim is going on inside, as opposed to actual words and actions. So they'll really focus, and this will be the same with them, right? They'll talk about their motives or their intents or whatever, and your motives and your intent. And generally yours will be put in a negative light and theirs in a positive light. But as opposed to like kind of backing up and then looking at like, well, I hear what you say your motives are, but here's what you did, right? And that's what I like to focus on. Like what is the actual outcome of your life? What is the actual thing that you did? Like you can tell me what your intentions are, but here's what you said, and here's what those words mean, right? Mm-hmm. And here's what those actual actions were as well. So I think manipulators are always trying to stay in the subjective, because the objective is harder to edit, is harder to change. Where the subjective, there's always kind of blurred edges, squishiness, like an ability to kind of shape the narrative. And manipulators like to be able to shape a narrative. So when the moment you try to nail them down, they get really uneasy. The moment you try to get receipts or them demonstrate the truth of their life or whatever, they're not going to want to do that. They're not going to want to talk about that. They also are going to emphasize a very particular type of loyalty, and that is loyalty to person more so than principles. So manipulators want you to do what they want to do, right? They don't want what's best for you, but what's best for them. And that's why they want a loyalty to them and not to principles. Principles are bigger to individuals. And that's why I always tell people that your marriage needs to terminate outside of your relationship. It has to have something bigger that you guys are working towards. And the problem is that a lot of marriages exist to make each other feel satisfied and happy. And I don't think humans can make each other in an ultimate sense satisfied and happy. And so there has to be some bigger goal. And I think it's got to be bigger than the children. That's why a lot of marriages, I've seen a lot of marriages fall apart after that final kid hits the senior year or goes away to college. That's where and it's because it became all about the kids. So for me, it's about the household. It's about the legacy. It's about the glory of God. And that's quite different. And that's why my marriage is, we are able to survive through some dark years and difficult periods. But a manipulator is going to always try to make it about, like I remember me and my wife were having a hard time. But early on in our marriage, we were fighting so much that we were talking about divorce. But ultimately, one thing that helped us not do that is that we made a covenant. We made vows. We made a vow before God, right? And that vow mattered. That covenant mattered. It's part of our Christian faith. And so we wanted to keep our word before the Lord. And so there's a principle above us that's bigger. Well, manipulators are narcissistic and egomaniacal, so there's nothing bigger than them in their mind, right? Ultimately. And so you keep hearing, they'll talk about how you did them wrong, you're unfaithful or whatever. That's another one. Just one more, I guess, is that they do nurse in you a scarcity mindset. Basically say like, they're the only ones that are telling the truth. They're the only ones that love you unconditionally. They'll try to make you feel like you don't have anywhere else to go.
But
and
Michael,
I see that
I'm the true red pill, bro. I'm the one true red
pill. That's right.
Bro.
You see that constantly the red pill, where anyone that comes into the space, they'll say, oh, there's all these people coming into the space trying to use the red pill and market it, and the Christian version of the red pill and the black version of the red pill and this version, you know, and they're like, but we're just trying to keep it, maintain the true orthodoxy. I don't think that's true. I honestly think that you're trying to control an audience for vanity's sake and for income's sake, and policing the orthodoxy here is less about the orthodoxy, whatever that is. You know, like people always tell me I'm not true red pill. I'm like, so what's, like, is there a red pill Bible? Right? Like, you know, like what's your holy scriptures? And some of them have a book that they treat like holy scripture, you know. It just depends on what they like. But what they want to say is there's no one else out there. Like, it's very scarce. And it's just not true. There are a lot of men out there trying to help men. There are a lot of people out there with similar ideas. This little niche of the internet, right? So there's like the Manosphere is a small niche. It's growing in influence, but there's a niche inside a niche. And these people that want to claim that their little fraction of a fraction is the only place where truth is told are gaming you. They're using you. It's funny. They'll talk about the importance of an abundance mindset, and then they're the only ones that can give you truth. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's insane, man. Before you go, Michael, I know you got to go in a minute. Can you just kind of recap what you started out with the show with, in terms of, you discussed briefly some roots of trauma and father hunger and these things. I really like that part.
I would just say that the problem with most men is that they don't have a clear mission and agenda for their life, and they're drawn to anyone that they perceive having that. And a lot of the people online posture, it may be real, it might not be. In many cases, we know it's not real, but a posture, a clear understanding of the world, of mission, of the agenda, how to relate to women, how to make money, whatever. And so a lot of guys are drawn to it. The question you have to ask yourself is, after digesting that content and listening to it, are you actually building? Are you actually accomplishing something? Or are you remaining a consumer that just consumes the same content that, like, confirms that you're a passive victim? The reason you can't find a good woman is because they don't exist. And that's my favorite thing, honestly, with Red Pill, is anytime I talk about where me and my wife are at, they'll say, well, all women aren't like that. It's just like,
yeah.
Do you understand how funny this is? And I agree. Look, women have fallen on a hard time. But me and my wife started dating like 20 years ago, you know, so I get it. There's different times, but I think, are they keeping you a consumer of content, or are you, or is it actually helping you produce real things in your life, have a drive, a mission? And in many cases, you know, it's not. These guys are using you. They're trying to keep you plugged in to their matrix, you know, feeding off them so they can use you. They're keeping you in their orbit by negging you, keeping you insecure, making you believe that only they can have happy marriages. I get all these guys telling me you can't have happy marriages, right? And I'm like, look, I'm a pastor. I've married lots of young couples. I've done their weddings. I've done their marriage counseling. I've done all that. I know the ins and out of their life, right? Like, there's one guy, I see he's been married like 4 years, not 3 years. It's a pretty little girl, right? He married this beautiful girl. She stays at home. They've had 3 kids already, right? 3 kids. It's like,
what a beta male.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but you know, they're living a great life, and my wife disciples his wife, and they keep up with each other, and I keep up with them, and they're doing just really good. And so these guys, oh, that can't happen. Oh, she's actually cheating on him. They need her to cheat on him. That's what they need. Because if she's not cheating on him, then that means that those relationships exist, and the fact that they don't have it reflects somehow on their ability. That's when you realize they need these things to be true. It's not that they can't face the hard reality. I always hear that. We're just telling people the bleak reality. You know, with a bleak reality, I got a bleak reality for you. Here's a bleak reality, is I know a lot of men that are marrying beautiful women that don't have a huge notch count on either side, and they're having kids, and they're very happy, and they're not beta at all. And so the bleak reality is you suck, right? That's the bleak reality, right? Or like you're damaged, or like there's you have problems, or you're in the wrong part of the country. I don't know what to tell you, but it's some of the failure in your life is your fault, right? Take responsibility for yourself. Manipulators will come in and flatter you and tell you that all the problems in your life are someone else's fault, right? Right.
Yeah, it's all
Not
women's
you.
fault, dude. Didn't you hear? Didn't you get the memo?
Yeah, it's all women, and that's the funny thing. It's like what you see in some of the anti-feminist groups is that for feminists, it's the patriarchy. Patriarchy is holding them back. But for some of the anti-feminists, it's really the feminine imperative, right? It's like the matriarchy is holding them down, which is like really hard for me to wrap my mind around. I thought men were natural leaders and were superior in this way and that way, and yet what the women how did the women get to control? This is some of the stuff where I end up disagreeing with some aspects of the MGTOW group. So those are some of my general thoughts. I just tell guys, like, look, if who you're listening to is just confirming all your biases, and then you're giving them super chats, like you're being played. You know what I mean? Like you want to look for people that challenge you and move you to action. If they're not moving you to action beyond buying their course and buying their book, which all have their places sometimes, but seriously, some of these guys are selling like a 40-page PDF for $50. I mean, what's wrong with you? I mean, there are so many good books.
Well, and it's a 40-page PDF that they plagiarized 100% of.
Almost always it is. This is email. They're all email content marketers. And you can even see the way they type and stuff. Like they're all from that same school. Yep. And then they got into this space. And they saw like, wow, look at the audience here, how valuable it was. Because I used to be in the reseller space. I ran a pretty successful Amazon FBA store before it all like took off and got crazy. But what I would see those courses out there, and those courses and these Manosphere courses are very similar. It's very similar stuff, very similar style and all that. And these are just content marketers, you know, and so they're just there to, here's something you learn in internet marketing. So basically there's a cycle between hard product and soft product, right? Soft product being that's content related, training courses, whatever. And when something's in its death throes, that's when a lot of that soft content comes out. So for example, for people that got in on FBA early, I mean, it was crazy how much money you can make. It was nuts, and how easy it was to make money by storing your product in Amazon warehouses and Amazon selling it for you. It was like nutty, man. And so then all the people that came in and made those millions decided they're going to create all this content to like for people that want to get involved in it. That's when something started to cycle back down. And then it leads back to some new physical product, and it cycles back up. This is a cycle you see play out over and over and over again in the internet. So right now, I would say we're watching guys run out all these masculinity courses, and I think that's telling us a little something about where the space is. The space is in trouble, but it'll come out in some new thing, just like FBA disappears, and then now people are doing their Shopify stores, and Shopify disappears and they're doing this. I think the Manosphere will come out on the other side. I think a lot of the YouTube communities are kind of in a terminal situation right now. I could be wrong, but that's how it comes across to me, having been involved in other aspects of the internet. So, hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Michael. I really appreciate your time, man. And I'd love to see you next week or another future episode, man. Hell yeah.
All right. God bless, guys.
Yeah. Probably not the best choice of words. Hell yeah, with Pastor. Whatever. He'll be fine.
Sure.
DJ, what do you, just me and you know, you had about, so what do you got?
All right. So I think I want to, first and foremost, let me kind of respond to what Michael said. So that's there. I agree with him on many points, but I also think that the internet is a reflection of what is happening in the real world. And we see this when you have major publications saying birth rate is down, marriage rate is down. People are now having less sex than they were a long time ago. And I think that when it comes to a lot of these things, the reality is that what's happening here is that you're seeing people consuming online content, and it's scaring traditional conservatives. It's scaring religious conservatives, because without families, they can't build religious communities, right? And that's a bad thing. And I can objectively say that is a bad thing. But I think that the other side of this is that what's happening is that there's many people discovering MGTOW content, and many of the people who oppose the MGTOW content per se, they're actually teaching MGTOW wisdom. Now, I want to say that this right here, not only is it MGTOW wisdom, much of this wisdom is found in a Bible. You know, if you buy a good study Bible, it's filled with practical advice on how to avoid manipulators, on how to avoid unhealthy women, on how to avoid unhealthy men, right? There's a lot of advice, salt and peppered throughout the Bible, that will actually teach you these things. So it's not like any tribe of the Manosphere has a monopoly on this knowledge. You're going to find these types of truths in a variety of places. The military, the United States military, used to teach men how to avoid women who went out of their way to manipulate them and say, look, when you go to this country, they're going to want to marry an American man. They're going to say and do whatever they need to do. And they're giving that red pill wisdom out. And they've been doing this for 50 years. So it's, again, the MGTOW community doesn't necessarily have a monopoly on all this advice, but what you're finding out is that nobody wants to talk about the realities of what's happening on the ground and what got us here. So, you know, we can talk all we want about having families and making stronger communities and doing all these things, but until we address the real problems, which are the laws and this huge epidemic of feminized men, right? We're not getting anywhere. And you could plant churches all over the country, but as long as these pastors continue to lack the courage to start pushing for legal reforms that harm the family. And by the way, you can't have a family without a man. And as long as you promote man shaming and misandry, families don't grow. And without families, you don't have communities, whether they're secular communities or religious communities. And many of these pastors know this. And I know that, like, you know, I've spoken with Michael Foster behind the scenes. He knows this, and he's actually doing the things, I think, in many that many pastors are not. And those things are extremely important. But that said, you know, again, shaming men, I don't think is the way forward per se. And I think that,
I want
again,
to chirp in here real briefly, just
yeah,
interject. I agree with you in that now there's some exceptions like Michael Foster, who's a really savage pastor, but yeah, the West in many ways is in a state of terminal decline, and escaping that velocity to just everything, you know, going into a black hole and we're all fucked is really difficult. And it's not clear. Now we all have opinions on how to do that, but it's not clear consensus wise how to do that because the stakes are so high.
well, the problem,
We're looking at the fall of Rome, basically.
the problem that you have, though, is that men can only take a certain amount of responsibility, right?
Okay.
So men can only be responsible for themselves, but they're not responsible for the fact that, you know, President Biden, for example, is giving out all this additional money to people, and smart people are going, okay, well, if I'm on unemployment and Biden's giving me an extra $300 a week, I'm now making more than I was making when I was gainfully employed. So it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I'm making more money sitting on my ass and playing video games and consuming YouTube content than I would be working. Right.
And your ability to stop that as a man is limited. You had voting, but obviously that was taken away.
Correct. And you could be as alpha as you want, but you can't change the dollars and cents of that particular top-down policy. It's the same thing is true when you have entrepreneurs and communities who have small and medium businesses that, because of the lockdowns, they've been destroyed. So now you have this scenario where all the money that would go into small business, which, by the way, is the reason that America's economy was so strong, was the innovation and the creation and the maintenance of small businesses. All that money, it goes up. It goes to the big corporations, the Walmarts, the Amazons, the multinationals.
The elephant in the room is that they didn't have to shut down. They could have started a civil war.
Exactly.
But their options were shit.
But my point is this. Men who run small businesses, men who manage small businesses, and these people, and that's not their fault that the shutdown happened. You know, you can't just go to these guys and go, bro, you got to be more alpha, right? You can't alpha the government. Look at the guy who had the gym. Okay, that guy's been to jail. That guy's got like tens of millions.
He's speaking at 21 convention. I'm talking to him. He's done. He's
Sure,
good to
sure.
go.
But my point is, he's been to jail. He's had his life destroyed, and all because he was trying to out alpha the system.
Yep.
And it's not, and he didn't do anything wrong. So we're clear. He should be what we should all strive to be as far as men are concerned. But my point is that this idea that we need to be telling men that they're losers because they're living in a community and in a society that, number one, it not only hates them, number two, it manipulates them and to be more effeminate. And so therefore it undermines positive masculinity. Number three, it's reframed positive masculinity as toxic masculinity. And it finds all the, and it's been happening for so long that these people just kind of dodge and weave and pivot in order to continue to discriminate against men. Now, on the same token, that doesn't mean that men need to have a victim complex. You still need to be self-reliant. You still need to be independent, both psychologically and emotionally, as well as, financially and socially. But I think that when it comes to those things, this is a two-tier system. And I think that, and one of my biggest problems that I've had with the PUA dating coach, positive masculinity crowd in the manosphere is that they can't look at the larger picture. It's all about, and again, I think that, Noah earlier and Michael hit this on the head, and that is, you can't shame men because you want more money, right? That's what they're doing. They're shaming men. They're doing that whole emotional blackmail, where they're shaming men, they're intimidating men, they're shitting on men. And you can't say, look, we're going to go ahead and shame men as a group, but we're also going to try to improve your lives. And you see this not only on the left, you see it in the Manosphere community, but you also see it in many Christian communities. Oh, just man up and get married, bro. And then all of a sudden they get divorce raped and their life is destroyed. Their credit is destroyed. Their reputation is destroyed. They're blacklisted from their career. And they're like, oh, bro, that's your fault. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I can tell you the reason I don't buy into that lie is because I know for myself and many other people is that, like, my second wife, I made her wait 5 years before she got married. She was a card-carrying Republican when I met her. She was a very, very conservative woman. When she walked out the door and abandoned me and our children, she was a card-carrying Democrat and she was a hardcore leftist. Okay? That shit doesn't happen in a vacuum. When you're living in a community that fosters that, Washington State, Puget Sound region, any left-wing stronghold,
Yep.
a lot of men have the same story. And so when, it's not necessarily just the male action, but it's also the environment that you live in. And so, a man is only going to have a certain amount of influence on his significant other. But if she's going to go out and she's going to be in environments where they hate men and they denigrate men and all these other things, sooner or later, just like these men who are groomed to be followers of Manosphere content creators, these women are being groomed as well. Now, that's not to say that these women are innocent or that they shouldn't be held responsible for their actions individually. But what it does mean is this, is that this is a twofold system. Women are being taken advantage of here just as well as men. And it does, just because you're a woman and you're a good Christian woman doesn't mean that you're immune from this sort of bullshit leftist indoctrination that is meant to not only destroy your family, but the community that you live in. Now, with that said, let me pivot back to your question, which was about manipulation advice as far as how to deal with it. Well, first and foremost, like I said, I need to reiterate this because I can't reiterate it enough. If you get yourself a good study Bible, it is filled with practical advice on how to deal with and how to avoid manipulators. Secondly, when you're meeting a woman or even a man for that point, ask open-ended questions. Get these people to talk about themselves, get them to talk about their history, get them to talk about other relationships. And I don't mean romantic relationships, but, values. What you're trying to do is you're trying to baseline them and you're trying to get an idea of what their value systems are. Many times what happens is when a relationship fails, and this is true in both of my marriages and many divorces that I've seen, is that the values of the husband and the wife, they either change, or they were never the same to begin with, or they got married for the wrong reasons. I can tell you right now, my first marriage, absolutely my fault. I married her for the wrong reasons. It wasn't a shotgun wedding. She wasn't pregnant when we got married, but I still married her for the wrong reasons. We had different value systems. That marriage failed. Now, as far as that is concerned, the other thing is this: watch how they treat others who can do nothing for them, right? So a lot of people are friendly, they're kind, they're considerate, as long as you can do something for them, right? So they're nice to you because they want something from you, right? But watch how they treat people who could do nothing for them. They don't give them any social credit. They don't have any money. They don't, they can't be manipulated, or they don't have anything that this person sees of value. If they treat those people well, odds are you've got somebody around you who's reasonable, whether they're male or female. And then the other thing that you need to be careful about is the interview. And what I mean by this is, guys, if you've done any dating, these women sit down there and they ask you fucking 20 questions like it's a goddamn job interview, right? So I think a great way to handle that is to say, yeah, I think that's great. So let me ask you, have you ever been diagnosed with a mental disorder? Have you ever taken antidepressants? Okay.
Yep.
For single women, especially women over 30, let me tell you something. You want to wind their ass up. That's a great way to do it. Or you could even say something as innocent as, well, what do you bring to the table? I've been saying this for years. I was one of the first people in the Manosphere to say that. What do you bring to the table other than, $3.99 sex, right? See, a lot of people think that MGTOW are they think that MGTOW are these guys who are basement dwellers who have no experience with women, when the reality is this: a lot of MGTOW guys have slept with women, they've dated women, some of us still do. And the issue isn't the dating. The issue isn't that they can't get laid. The issue is they want a relationship and they can't bridge that gap for whatever reason, whether it's their fault, the woman's fault, society's fault, regardless of what the situation is. So, but my point is, be aware of the interview, because that's a huge issue. Because what happens is, if they're interviewing you, this is not a relationship now. It's a zero-sum game. Now it's like a power thing. They try to do this in order to gain power so they can control you right from the get-go.
Well,
right?
the questions, I want to pause on this real quick and
Go
see
ahead.
if you have thoughts on it. I think when someone's asking you questions, particularly a woman like that is probing you, she's not only asking about you, and that's where guys might get hung up on. They might kind of get freeze up or whatever the situation may be for them. The questions from her reveal what she values, what she cares about, for whatever reason, right? Whatever the motivations are. So the questions are actually revealing to her own thinking, to what she's thinking about proceeding, meeting up with you on a date or whatever, as well as in the moment, as well as in your immediate or long-term future. She's fixating and focusing on those things.
Yeah, her questions tell you a lot about her. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So we'll jump back into it. The other thing is, do not allow yourself to be compartmentalized. Oh, I'm going to my mom's this weekend. Great. When are we leaving? What?
Yeah.
Great. When are we leaving? Right? Let's go to your mom's. I want to meet your mom.
Yeah.
Or I want to go out this evening. Great. When are we leaving? And here's something else that's important too.
Well, why is she even going anywhere without your permission? First of all, I mean,
Well, I'm talking about like in that intermediate dating thing. But I'll tell you what, I think you have a good point there. But the other side of that is, married women do this shit too. And here's something that nobody's going to tell you. I'm going to tell you. I've said this many times before, and there's science now to prove this. I said this 3 or 4 years ago. Women who are on hormonal birth control are attracted to more effeminate men than they are when they're not. So you see this scenario where you're dating a woman and you're like, wow, this woman's amazing. And, I'm a sensitive guy and blah, blah, blah. And then you get married and then you have kids and she gets off the birth control, right? She gets pregnant. She gets off the birth control. You have kids. Well, her hormones change and what she's attracted to changes. And one of the most common refrains that you hear from a lot of these women going through divorces, I just stopped loving him and I don't know why. It's the hormonal birth control. If you really want to know if a woman is truly attracted to you, and you find out she's on hormonal birth control, have her get off of it for 2 months.
Yep.
If your relationship survives, odds are she's still attracted to you. If your relationship doesn't survive, that tells you 2 things. 1, she's attracted to something different naturally, and 2, you might be an effeminate man, right? Because the hormonal birth control is saying, look, so you got to do things to work on your masculinity per se. But again, going back to that compartmentalization, that's one of the things. Like these women, they go out and they do like ladies' night out. A lot of these women, when they do ladies' night out, it's because they're ovulating. And so they want to go out, and they want to get taken. But regardless of that, the other thing that you need to do in order to avoid manipulation is you need to reconcile your relationship in the same way you would reconcile your bank account or any kind of business thing that you're going to do. So, is a relationship one-sided? Are you the only one who's investing? Are you the only one who's initiating what's going on? Because the reality is this as well. The relationship ends when the investment stops. And if it is not a reciprocal relationship, then you're being taken for a ride. And the other side of this too, that's just as important, in 2021, women don't need men's money anymore. There are a lot of women out there that make a significant amount of money. So, yeah, maybe they bring a little bit of money to the table, but the other side of this is, what do you again, it's that, what do you bring to the table? You can't, as a man, you need to ask yourself too, what do you bring to the table as well? But that said, the other thing that you need to consider is this as well. Never put your woman on a pedestal, never lionize her. And this goes to relationships as well, because what happens is it creates blind spots. And what I mean by that is, I talked about the red pill blind spot, where you get these guys out there and they're like, look, you can trust me, or this and this and that. And I'm just like, I don't give a shit if you trust me. Verify what you do in your own time. I don't need your trust to tell you the truth. My ethics don't require it. All I'm saying is that if I say something on my YouTube channel and you see that as valid and true, great, operate on that. But I don't have a monopoly over truth or knowledge. I'm not the truth police, and I'm definitely not the thought police. But if you lionize me and you treat me as though I'm something that I'm not, and because I'm just an average nobody behind a keyboard, what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to manipulate you, and it's going to allow me to groom you in a direction that I want. And in many cases, for a lot of these content creators, it's about being pay pigs to the point of, I want you to be my pay pig. I want you to hook me up. I want to be able to, you know what I'm saying?
That's exactly. I was tweeting that, or calling on people that the other day. They want these little pay pigs on YouTube, these little Manosphere pay pigs.
Yeah,
pigs.
yeah. And I mean, and don't get me. And here's the thing: like most of these guys have no overhead. I mean, yeah, it would be great if people supported my content. It would be great if people, connected to my Subscribe Star or bought my book or whatever. But the reality is that, number one, I don't need it, because that's not necessarily why I'm here. It's not the main reason I'm here. But if my web hosting paid for itself or things like that, I think those things are, that's again, I don't think no one should make money from the Manosphere. But I think if your whole goal is to be a shill, go play hide and go fuck yourself, because nobody has time for snake oil, right?
Let me speak to this as an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur in the Manosphere for 15 years. It's our 15-year anniversary. That's a really long period of time for any industry and any entrepreneur. That I started that at 17 years old is particularly remarkable. I think is an objective fact that would be true of any young entrepreneur in any industry. What I can say is that I'm one of the few Manosphere entrepreneurs that does sizable revenue and also has sizable expenses. You were hitting the nail on the head that most of these guys bring in these pay pig super chats and whatever their business model is, and their overhead is very low. Typically, their overhead is actually much more personal, and I know this for a fact in some cases. They're paying out heavy mortgages that they don't need for all kinds of stupid shit because the wife roped them into a second house, shit like that, or they're paying off single moms that they formerly wifed up, they got divorce raped by. So they're paying on alimony and child support and all this garbage. That's actually where the expenses go. They're actually facilitating the stupid historical decisions of somebody, rather than an entrepreneur like myself, totally shill or brag, but this is true. This is a fact.
Well,
I spend a huge amount of money that we bring in on the company itself. I spend as much as possible to reduce the taxes that we pay.
Right, but let me kind of stop you there, because you sit in a very unique position in the Manosphere, and you sit in a place that no one else in the Manosphere I have ever met sits in, and that is that you are primarily a voice of the Manosphere, and you are an event promoter, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not a dating coach. You're not a PUA coach. You're not trying to sell your online courses or anything like that. You are an event promoter. And what you're doing is you're bringing voices, you're bringing online masculine voices together in real world settings and allowing people to meet them so they can judge them for themselves. And that is a product that no one else offers. Everybody else that's doing this type of thing, they're a dating coach, they're buy my stuff, buy my shit, buy my whatever, right? But the reality is that your primary source of income specifically comes from event promotion and enhancing the Manosphere in that way. Yeah, it's a business. You're honest about that, but you're not necessarily spending 100% of your time shilling yourself. You're not making any money on the Red Man Group. And I know this because I've seen your books and as far as the finances are concerned. So I know that's what I'm saying. That's one of the reasons why I can support you, because you're not part of the problem when it comes to a lot of the shilling that's happening or a lot of the grooming that's happening that effeminizes men. And that brings me to my final point to bring this full circle. When you discover that you're being taken advantage of, when you discover that you have been lied to, when you discover that someone's trying to manipulate you or they're trying to emotionally blackmail you, the next thing you need to be aware of is that the second that they know that you need to expect massive blowback, especially if these people are absolute sociopaths, dark triads, narcissists. You're going to experience full spectrum defamation, slander, or there's people that are they're going to take facts out of context, in dishonest fashion, or they're going to take half truths, or again, they're going to look at the lowest part of your life and then they're going to turn around and pretend that's who you were the entirety of your life. And I've had all this stuff happen to me, just like, Anthony has. And frankly, again, if you don't sign my paycheck, you don't give me a grade, and you're not in bed, giving me fellatio, your opinion doesn't fucking matter.
Yep.
So, and every man needs to have that attitude, because again, it's a what's in it for me attitude. And that's not from a position of greed. That's a combination of self-preservation, and it's self-confidence. More importantly, it's basically saying that, look, I know who I am. I know what my value is, not only in interpersonal relationships, but in business, in friendship, and those types of things. And I think that as long as you understand that thing, I think that creates a level of resilience that reinforces your ability to discern a lot of the manipulation and stuff that goes out. Because again, it doesn't matter if the person's like, look, buy my ebook, and again, myself at some level included. If the ebook doesn't have value, it doesn't have original content, don't buy it. Okay.
Yeah.
My book has original content, but beyond that, people are like, oh, donate to my super chat, or donate to this, or donate to that, or buy my dating course, or, donate to my church type of thing. If these people if you go to church and their constant message is give me money, they're no better than anybody in the manosphere, right? The worst shills of the manosphere. And the same is true for, a lot of these nonprofit social justice movements. This type of shilling and this type of con artistry is just as common in conservative circles as it is in liberal circles. So don't create an us versus them
You mean
attitude.
like BLM, buy large mansions kind of thing?
Exactly. Buy large mansions, give money for the for the birds or for the environment. The reality is that the NGO industrial complex is doing the same thing that televangelists have been doing for decades. And what they're doing is they're using their nonprofits to personally enrich themselves at the expense of their followers and whatever cause that they have. That's why you see these televangelists with these huge houses and private jets and everything else. And now we're seeing the NGO industrial complex do the same thing. The BLM founder, she's got 4 houses. One of those houses has its own private airstrip and an air hangar. So again, oh yeah, yeah. So and we could focus and be myopically focused on the BLM lady, but the reality is she's one example of many. Who do you think she learned that from, right? Yeah. So you have to understand the shills and the con artists who are trying to, turn your heartstrings. They're just as common in the conservative sphere as they are in the leftist sphere, the left-wing sphere. So nobody has a monopoly on this. And I think that, again, when it comes to being a strong, critically thinking, discerning, self-reliant man, you need to surround yourself in the real world with people like that. If the only self-reliant men you know are the voices you hear on the internet, you're doing something wrong. You have to be able to forge relationships in the real world, personal relationships, professional relationships, family relationships. These things are absolutely necessary. And if you destroy these relationships, or you destroy the bridges that forge these relationships, you're going to destroy yourself in the end, and you're going to be in the corner, and there will be nobody there to help you.
Yeah, well put, man. I did want to revisit something we talked about just a few minutes ago. We were talking about in this back and forth monologue or duologue, I guess you call it, duologue, being an entrepreneur in the Manosphere, and you mentioned that I was unique, and I think that's correct, and I appreciate that. That's a correct assessment. Because I'm not a dating coach, because I'm not a pickup artist anymore or anything like that. I don't even offer coaching services. I just build events, and then
Well,
I
being a
create
pickup
videos.
artist is different than being a pickup artist coach. That's my point there.
Oh, true, for sure, for sure. What I wanted to say too, though, and you might find this interesting. So even these business models that I think Michael Foster was referring to earlier, like these cycles that you see in different industries, including the Manosphere. In the 2000s, the way to make money, the primary method, we call it, and negatively you would call it a grift, it was like ebooks back then. That was the thing, ebook. They had these ebooks, and then you get bonus little ebooks with it, right? That was the thing. And there was these huge sales pages these guys had paid to have written. That still goes on to some degree. We're talking like 20, 50, 100-page sales letters. It was ridiculous what they paid these copywriters to write. It was crazy. RSD was the worst. So you had ebooks. Then that eventually morphed into DVD set and audio sets, right? That would sell for like $800, similar to the courses we see today, before online courses was a thing as it is now. So then it became boot camps were going on. That was a big thing for a while. That was like the product to sell, the workshop, the boot camp, the physical thing.
Right,
Small.
right.
And
Especially
so,
like the real estate investor grift or the rich man, poor man BS.
yeah, they're all the real estate conferences are the snakiest, slimiest things in the world. It's the only industry I would say is worse is wealth creation stuff and real estate stuff. Those events are unbelievably fucking toxic, and they have upsell workshops to a ridiculous. They have $20,000 private workshops where you learn the secrets of real estate selling, and this is like an hour or two course in some back room at a hotel. It's an unbelievable fucking con. They have all kinds of they go into the science of like they actually do this for real. They crank the lights up in a room to absolute peak maximum brightness. They overlight a conference room because it boosts sales by like 2%. Like it's crazy. It wakes people up a little bit, this and that, right? And then they're selling just absolute bullshit, right? $15,000-$20,000 workshops where you learn the magic tricks of real estate flipping, all this bullshit. Shit you could learn on the internet for free in like fucking an hour or two. What I wanted to say though, so one of the things, so the Manosphere, let's focus back on that. There's ebooks, there's workshops, there's boot camps, there's DVD sets, there's audio sets, there's video courses, there's online courses, there's Gumroad, shit like that. It's thing after thing after thing after thing. And there's even private groups now. You pay a monthly membership fee. That's a current kind of common thing. That's new. That's going to fizzle away, I think, in the coming months and years. Because it's a cycle of business. It's a business cycle, basically, rotating
Well,
through.
I also think too that with these private groups that that are paywalled, right? I think
Yep.
what's going to end up happening is that when the people who are leading these groups, when their followers find out that the leaders are not living the lifestyle they're telling everybody else that they are, or they're not following the rules that they're giving everybody else, that hypocrisy is going to destroy these groups.
That's right. That's right. I think that will be a major issue. I agree. And then on top of that, people are just going to get bored. The customers are going to get bored of the business model. A lot of guys that are in this mindset right now, they're fans of whatever the thing is, the course, the group, whatever. They don't see beyond a few months or like a couple of years that they're actually going to get bored of the service model they're being delivered from a guy who's probably a fake anyway. But even if he's not, even if it's a little more complicated, it's a popular thing that's being done right now, and it'll definitely be different in a couple of years. That's why it's different now than it was 5 years ago. Courses in the Manosphere are much less common 5 years ago than they are now in 2016. My point, though, is from my perspective, if you notice, what I do is I do something different. I've been selling tickets to conventions for 14, 15 years now, and that's the bulk of what our revenue is. And you're right, that's what I do. And that's a very old school thing, right? That's well beyond the Manosphere as a service model and a product. And I'm really good at developing the conference tickets, but I go beyond that.
And you're not trying to upsell anything. You're not trying to do a bait and switch. You're not trying to do these, buy my course type of shit, right?
No,
And
that's how most conferences make their money is they sell
Right.
you a ticket, and then the back end they upsell super aggressively. And a lot of people who are not in the industry don't understand that. It's all an upsell model. It's a huge scam to get you in the door and to qualify you as a potential customer. They charge you $2,000 to charge you $10,000. That's actually the model. But here's the thing I wanted to get to is even online, we make money with videos through advertising, 21 University and stuff like that. 21 University, for example, is $20 a month. And I've been doing that since 2015. And I love doing that. And if you notice, that's very different from what everyone else does. People do Patreon, they do the courses, they do the ebooks. I don't. I like to avoid that cycle of history repeating itself in the Manosphere and do my own thing that I love to do, which is create a premium video service that now even has iPhone and Android apps and tablet apps and stuff, as well as the website. It's very useful in the age of cancel culture, number one. Number two, we can focus on what we're good at, which is making awesome videos and delivering them in the best way possible. So I don't care. People have encouraged me for years to do a lot more courses and all this bullshit and books. I just don't give a fuck. It's not what I'm good at. It's not what I love doing. It's not central to the mission
Well,
of
and it's
creating
important.
these events.
And it's important for you to stay in your lane. You know, you do what you're
Exactly.
good at. And a lot of these
Exactly.
people who are trying to get you to expand and everything else, you know, some of
Yeah.
those people you've had falling out with, and it turns out that they wanted you to hopefully overextend yourself so that you
Exactly.
self-destruct.
Exactly. There can be malice behind it. Even if it's well intentioned, they're you know, people try to give me business advice. They've been an entrepreneur for like 2-3 years, and it's like, bro, there's a reason I've existed for this long, and that you are much newer and you don't know what you're talking about. You're just kind of talking out your ass. They get overconfident in these things. But yeah, it's stay in your lane, focus on what you're good at, and don't overextend. And this is a thing that most young entrepreneurs have zero fucking idea about. Zero. I've seen this with events. I've seen it with Republican events locally in Orlando. I've seen that are falling apart because they overextend and they don't double down on what they're good at, on what's important to them, on what's core. They have all these fantasies about blowing up and going viral like every other fucking idiot on the internet. And they don't understand that that's exactly how you lose steam and you lose focus and you lose attention on what matters.
Well,
And what do? I just focus. 21 convention, 21 convention, 21 convention, 20 university, 21 convention for over and over and over and over and over and over. And rarely do I diverge from that, except with something directly stemming from it, like 22 convention for women, which was very successful, as you saw last year.
Well, and the reality is that, you know, anybody can be a flash in a pan. Anybody can have their 15 minutes of fame, but
Yep.
it's about maintaining what you do, and it's about the slow burn. You know, anybody can be successful for 15 minutes, but can you be successful for 5 years? Can you be successful for 10 years? You know,
About 15 years.
are you a 60-year-old man with no retirement living in a studio apartment trying to sell success porn? You know,
Yep.
or are you a 20-year-old kid living in your parents' basement trying to sell success porn? Those things, you know, again, it's about what you do, and it's about the success of maintenance and longevity and the slow burn. When you have that slow burn, you know, you basically stand the test of time, and that's the advantage of the truth and ethics and you know, forthright communication. All these things stand the test of time.
That's right. And as you know, DDJ, we've talked about, I think just privately, maybe publicly a little bit. I've had an enormous number of competitor Manosphere events that, for the most part, were just friendly, you know, auxiliary events doing their own thing. The list is really extensive. It's like 15 fucking events, some of which are still ongoing. I was just down at the War Room Summit, the War Room Convention down in Miami, for example, last weekend. Cobra Tate hosted that with his brother, and they had about 50 guys show up from around the world. And that's a cool thing. And I have zero problem with that. I went there to go check it out, to interview the founder and stuff. There's also the ICMI that you're familiar with, probably. That's where Paul Elam speaks, Janice Fiamengo, Sean Smith.
Yeah, I think I was invited to a couple of those at one point.
Yeah, and Terrence Pop helped get that going back when they got canceled in like 2013, I think. Paul Elam was setting it up, and then the hotel booted him out, you know, because of bomb threats and stuff. But there's a lot of Manosphere events that I've seen come and go. Most of them just fizzle out. The men's rights one actually is one of the longer running ones now. But a lot of the dating ones, the Dating Conference, Cliff's List, PUA Summit, the Real Men Conference, the Morton Hackey Summit, you know, the Man in Demand Conference in 2015. I mean, there's a huge number of Manosphere conventions and conferences in the graveyard now that were hot as shit in their time. The Real Men Conference, when it first started, had like 400 and something men show up to it. It's the biggest Manosphere event that's ever been held by far. Even 21 convention peaked at like 230 is our highest we ever had. 450 men or whatever showed up in Amsterdam in 2008. That's massive for a 2-day event. That's big, man. That's not like 10,000 or nothing, but that's a lot. And that's not even possible, I think, in today's Manosphere to get that many guys. No, that would be incredibly difficult, even if that was your like life goal. But yeah, so it's the slow and steady wins the race, and that's why I've survived all these events, is because they don't focus and they don't have the same vision and the same determination and discipline to focus, which means, like you do, DDJ, you have to ignore people who don't matter and ignore opinions that don't matter. If I don't fucking know you, I'm not putting my dick in you. I don't care about, you know, I don't have a specific reason to care.
Well, I know you. I'm not putting my dick in you regardless. Sorry.
Thanks. I appreciate that. You know, I like my asshole dick free. But
Probably for the best.
Yeah, yeah. But it's really about focusing on what you care about, what you're good at, staying in your lane after you pick your lane. I didn't just randomly pick it, like I made these decisions over time. But that's how you survive as an entrepreneur. And I think that has relation to surviving as a man, is not overextending yourself and focusing on too much miscellaneous bullshit over time. These guys like in the manosphere, they just focus on too much shit. Like focus on what's important to you and what your problems are in the future.
Well, and I think the other side of this is what a lot of people forget is this. There's a lot of people out there that are working a full-time job. But in this day and age where small businesses are failing, if you can start a small business, you're gold. And I know a lot of guys who use a small business as their side hustle. Maybe they're a mechanic during the day, right? They work on cars 9 to 5 at the Ford dealership or something like that. And then they say, you know what? I'm going to build a garage in my house and I'm going to start repairing cars on the weekends. And all that money goes in their pocket.
Yeah.
The same thing is true with, with these people who are electricians, or they work in the trades. They work for someone else maybe during the week, but then they have a side hustle where they take that same skill and they open up a business doing it. Or maybe the husband is working a 9 to 5 and the wife opens up a business that they both work together. So there's a lot of opportunity now, especially with a lot of small businesses closing, that if you can run a business with you and maybe 1 or 2 other people, and you can create a small business, you can create yourself a sustainable income, especially in COVID. There were a lot of millionaires that were created during the Great Depression between 1929 and 1939. And it was because people took advantage of the opportunities and they built things from the ground up, that some of these things are still resilient today. And they started out as small businesses, one-man operation types of scenarios. So there's a lot of ways for men today to become entrepreneurs with very little money or very little financial investment. And then, but you have to be willing to work 7 days a week for a while, right? You have to be willing to work 2 jobs sometimes, or things like that. And again, but once you do that, you have to stay in your lane, right? You have to know when to say no. You have to know when to not overextend, and you have to stay in your lane. And you can't be greedy, because if you provide a good product or you provide a good service, the reality is the money takes care of itself.
Yeah, greed is the downfall of man. There's a reason the Christians talk about it as a deadly sin, I believe, right? 7 deadly sins. Yeah,
Exactly,
and we see that in the Manosphere now, man. These super chat pay pigs and the greedy men and the sheep, and
and the
it's
people,
very obvious,
yeah, the people like you, whether it's MGTOW community or whether it's across the Manosphere, the people that are the most vitriolic, the people that are the biggest backstabbers, those are the ones that are the most desperate. They're trying to create this get rich quick grift, and they think that, oh, well, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to mooch off somebody else's thing, and then I'm going to go ahead and kick them straight under the bus because it's Tuesday. And that's different than somebody who's been around for a while, who's been a grifter the whole freaking time and nobody's caught on. And then somebody wakes up one day and says, hey, this guy's a grifter. That's a whole different scenario, right? So I think that when we look at this, that's why it's important to bring this full circle. That's why it's important to know how to spot liars, to know how to spot manipulators, to know how to spot grifters, whether they're male or female, whether it's in an intimate relationship or a professional relationship, and whether it's somebody that or it's somebody that you like their content. What kind of person are they? What kind of ethics do they have? What kind of values do they bring to the table? And do they speak the uncomfortable truth, knowing that there's going to be repercussions, or are they just providing fan service in an effort to keep their product up?
Yeah, are they just saying edgy stuff that's role playing as savage to pander to people? Yeah, I've noticed that a lot. It's for the average guy who's just tuning in to some YouTube channel, it's hard to discern that, but that's a real thing. It's pandering through this fake savagery to guys who are hurt, wounded, and justifiably under attack in the culture as a man and as a father and whatnot. So yeah, it's complicated, but I think we've done a good job today, kind of going over this content for the guys, waking up the dudes, the men.
Yeah. Well, and for anybody who hasn't, check out Michael Foster's content, check out Noah Revoy's content.
Yep.
They take things from a different perspective than I do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't agree with everything I say. They don't have to, because they offer a lot of value. So check them out.
Well, I'm going to wrap up today's show. We're almost at 2 hours exactly. I appreciate you tuning in, DDJ, and appreciate your patience getting the show started. I'm going to get a new, I think I need a new adapter for my camera, like a more expensive streamer one. I have a couple of these ones that are like $100, but I'm going to buy like a nice fat golden one. See how it goes. But anyway, everybody check out DDJ's YouTube channel, Miss Andrew Today. There's a link in the description. And he's also on Twitter, although his Twitter account's a bit longer. But find him on BitChute, actually, be the best one. Miss Andrew today on BitChute. I'm on Twitter at Beach Muscles, and today's show has episode 141 been sponsored again by 21 University. Check it out on the App Store on your iPhone, iPad, or Android device. It's a free download with a free account. And if you want a premium account, it's only $19.99 a month, or it's a free 30-day trial. It supports the Redman Group, 21 Convention, 22 Convention, 21 Studios, everything like that. And it's awesome. It's a good service, and we own the vast majority of it, so it's a lot more bulletproof, so to speak, or durable than YouTube channels, which can be shadow banned, throttled, and of course deleted, like our good friend Stefan Molyneux. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Me and DDJ are going to hop off. We'll see you in the near future. Bobby, thanks for hopping on today. Check out his book too on Amazon, The Feminist Lie. Normally you would see a copy on my video here. Excellent book, one of the best in the Manosphere by far. It's probably the MGTOW, the Manosphere's Bible on how shitty feminism is. It's an excellent piece of artwork, really. So, DJ,
Right on.
peace out.
All right. Take care,
Pull us
guys.
off.